In the quiet town of Willow Creek, Oregon, a chilling mystery was unfolding in the life of a young family. 4-year-old Abigail Harper stood in the middle of her cozy living room, her tiny hands gently rubbing her belly. Her parents, Eleanor and Nathan, barely noticed at first. Abigail had always been a bundle of energy, chasing her stuffed bunny around the backyard or giggling through bedtime stories. But lately something was off. Her belly, once flat and soft, was starting to protrude not just a little, but enough to catch her own attention. "Mommy, my tummy feels funny," she said one evening, her voice small but clear. Eleanor, juggling dinner prep in their modest kitchen, chuckled. "Oh, Abby, you've been sneaking too many cookies, haven't you?" She ruffled her daughter's hair, thinking it was nothing more than a phase. But the days passed, and Abigail's belly didn't shrink. If anything, it grew. By the end of the week, it wasn't just a cute toddler pudge, it was alarmingly round, almost like a pregnant woman's. Eleanor's laughter faded into unease. Nathan, a high school science teacher, brushed it off as maybe too much mac and cheese or a stubborn case of constipation. Kids got bloated sometimes, didn't they? Yet, when Abigail started complaining about feeling stuffed even after skipping snacks, Eleanor's maternal instincts kicked into overdrive. She watched her daughter waddle across the living room, her favorite pink dress straining against her swollen abdomen. It wasn't normal. It wasn't right. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. That night, after Abigail struggled in the bathroom with no relief, Eleanor sat on the edge of her daughter's bed, stroking her hair. "Does it hurt, sweetie?" she asked, her voice trembling. Abigail shook her head, her blue eyes wide. "It's just heavy. Like so meetings pussing inside. The Wirt sent a shiver down Eleanor's Spine." She tried to stay calm, telling herself it was probably just gas or a tummy bug. But deep down, a gnawing fear was taking root. The next morning, she called Willow Creek Pediatric Clinic. "Hi, this is Eleanor Harper. My daughter's belly, it's getting bigger, like, really big. She says it feels heavy, but there's no pain. I'm worried. Can we come in today?" The receptionist's voice was calm, professional, but Eleanor could sense the urgency in her quick agreement. At the clinic, Dr. Margaret Ellis, a kind but no-nonsense pediatrician, examined Abigail. She pressed gently on the girl's distended belly, her brow furrowing as she moved the stethoscope. No obvious tenderness, no fever. Let's try an ultrasound to get a better look." The machine hummed as it glided over Abigail's skin, but the screen showed something Dr. Ellis couldn't quite explain. "This doesn't look like typical constipation," she said, her tone guarded. "There's something there, but it's not clear. I'm going to refer you to Portland General for more tests." Eleanor's heart sank. Nathan, who'd taken a half-day from work, squeezed her hand, but his face was pale. What could be inside their little girl? A tumor? A blockage? The possibilities swirled in their minds, each one more terrifying than the last. At Portland General, Abigail underwent a battery of tests: blood work, X-rays, an MRI. The sterile hospital smells and the cold, hard tables made her cling to her bunny tighter. Eleanor and Nathan sat in the waiting room, their coffee growing cold as they whispered fears they couldn't voice aloud. The first set of results came back inconclusive. No tumors, no obvious masses, no signs of infection. Yet Abigail's belly continued to swell, now so prominent it was impossible to ignore. Nurses exchanged uneasy glances, and the lead doctor, a gastroenterologist named Dr. Samuel Reed, called them into his office. "We're seeing something unusual in the scans," he said, his voice measured. "There's a structure in her abdominal cavity, but it's not consistent with any organ or fluid buildup we'd expect. It's moving faintly, but it's there." Eleanor's Brit kaukt. "Moving? What does that mean?" "Like a parasite."
Doctor.
Reed hesitated, his eyes flicking to the scans on his computer. We can't say for sure. It doesn't match any known parasitic patterns, and it's not behaving like a typical mass. We need to consult a specialist in rare conditions. Nathan leaned forward, his voice tight. Is she in danger? Is this thing hurting her?
Doctor.
Reed's pause was agonizing. Right now, she's stable.
No pain, no fever.
But we don't know what this is or how it's affecting her long term. We're transferring her to OHSU for advanced imaging and a second opinion. At Oregon Health and Science University, the mystery deepened. Abigail, now visibly tired from the endless tests, lay quietly as technicians scanned her with cutting-edge equipment. The new team, led by Dr.
Nathaniel Haperno, Relation to the Familie Spezializit in Pediatric Anomalies.
His face grew graver with each scan. This isn't a cyst or a tumor, he told Eleanor and Nathan in a hushed conference room. The structure appears organic, almost like living tissue, but it's not human. It's interacting with her organs, possibly drawing nutrients.
Eleanor's Hans shook.
What do you mean, not human? How did it get inside her?
Doctor.
Harper shook his head.
We don't know.
It could be something she ingested, a seed, a spore, something microscopic that took root. But this is unprecedented. Abigail's condition wasn't just a medical puzzle, it was becoming a living nightmare. Her belly, now impossibly large for her small frame, moved subtly under her skin, as if something inside was shifting. She didn't cry out in pain, but her words were haunting. "Mommy, it feels like my tummy's dancing," she whispered one night, her voice sleepy but certain. Eleanor, stroking her daughter's cheek, felt a chill. Was something alive inside her? Growing? Feeding? The thought was too horrifying to dwell on, yet it consumed her every waking moment. Nathan scoured medical journals online, desperate for answers, while Eleanor prayed silently, clutching Abigail's bunny as if it could protect her. The hospital became their second home. Specialists from across the country were consulted, but no one could identify the entity in Abigail's abdomen. It wasn't a parasite, not in the traditional sense. It wasn't a tumor either. It was something else, something science hadn't named. As days turned into weeks, the Harpers' lives unraveled. Eleanor took leave from her job as a librarian, and Nathan's students noticed his distracted, hollow-eyed demeanor. Friends brought casseroles and offered prayers, but the whispers in Willow Creek were growing. "Did you hear about the Harper girl? Something's wrong with her."
So meeting wird.
The rumors only deepened the family's isolation, as they grappled with a truth too strange to share. The hospital room at OHSU was a sterile cocoon, its white walls and beeping machines a constant reminder of the unknown lurking inside Abigail. Eleanor sat by her daughter's bed, her eyes red from sleepless nights. Abigail, now visibly weaker, still managed a small smile when her mother read her favorite book, The Velveteen Rabbit. But the joy was fleeting. Every night, Eleanor felt the subtle movements in Abigail's belly, small, deliberate shifts that made her skin crawl. Nathan, meanwhile, was relentless, contacting every medical contact he could find. A friend from his college days, now a biologist, mentioned a rare case from the 1980s where a child had ingested a plant seed that sprouted in their stomach. "It's extremely rare," he said, "and usually causes inflammation."
But Abigail's case sounds different.
Different didn't begin to cover it. The latest scans, using a hybrid 3D imaging technique, revealed something chilling.
Doctor.
Harper showed the Harpers a monitor displaying Abigail's abdominal cavity. There, nestled among her organs, was a structure that looked like a web of roots, pulsing faintly. "It's not just sitting there, Dr. Harper explained, his voice tight. "It's integrated with her blood vessels, almost like it's created its own circulatory system. It's feeding off her nutrients, which is why her belly's growing. Eleanor's knees buckled, and Nathan caught her. Feeding, she whispered.
Like it's alive. Doctor.
Harper nodded grimly. It's exhibiting characteristics of both plant and animal tissue. We've never seen anything like it. The implications were staggering. Was this thing a parasite? A mutation? Something extraterrestrial, as absurd as that sounded?
The Harpers, meins relet.
They thought back to every moment of Abigail's life, her trips to the local park, the time she played in the creek behind their house, the summer they visited a petting zoo. Could she have swallowed something? A berry? A bug?
Noting Madesense. Doctor.
Harper's team sent samples of Abigail's blood and tissue to labs across the country, but the results were maddeningly vague. The entity wasn't bacterial, viral, or fungal. It was, as one lab put it, biologically anomalous. Abigail's condition began to take a toll. She tired quickly, her once boundless energy sapped. Yet her appetite remained oddly robust. "I'm hungry, Mommy," she'd say, even as her belly strained against her clothes. The doctors noted that the entity seemed to activate after meals, its movements more pronounced. They tried adjusting her diet, limiting sugars and starches, but it made no difference. The thing inside her was thriving, and Abigail was fading. Eleanor and Nathan were caught in a cycle of hope and despair, clinging to every new test result, every specialist's opinion, only to be met with more questions.
Von Night, es Eleanor satt bei Abigails Bett, the girl stiert.
"Mommy, it's talking to my tummy," she mumbled, half asleep.
Eleanor frotze.
Talking?
What do you mean, sweetie? Abigails eyes fluttered open.
It's like whispers. It likes my food. The words were so innocent, yet they sent Eleanor into a panic. She called Dr. Harper immediately, who arrived within the hour. He listened to Abigail's description, his face unreadable. It could be her imagination, he said, but his tone lacked conviction. Kids process things differently. But we'll monitor her closely. The hospital staff began 24-hour observation, attaching sensors to Abigail's abdomen to track the entity's movements. The data was unsettling. The structure was growing, albeit slowly, and its activity spiked after meals.
Doctor.
Harper consulted with a colleague in Boston who specialized in rare parasitic infections. "If it's a parasite, it's unlike anything in the literature," the colleague said over a video call. "It's almost like it's adapted to her body, coexisting rather than attacking." The word coexisting made Eleanor's stomach churn. This wasn't coexistence, it was invasion. As weeks passed, the Harpers faced mounting pressure. The hospital bills were piling up, and Nathan's insurance was stretched thin. Friends organized a fundraiser in Willow Creek, but the attention only fueled local gossip. "I heard it's some kind of alien thing," one neighbor whispered at the grocery store. Eleanor overheard and felt her face burn with anger and shame. She wanted to scream that this was her daughter, not a tabloid headline. But the rumors weren't entirely wrong. The entity was alien in every sense, defying all known biology.
Doctor.
Harper proposed a radical step, a biopsy to extract a sample of the entity itself. The procedure was risky, given its integration with Abigail's organs, but it was their best chance at understanding what they were dealing with. Eleanor and Nathan agonized over the decision. "What if it hurts her?" Eleanor asked, her voice breaking. "What if we do nothing, and it keeps growing?" Nathan countered, his own voice hoarse. They signed the consent forms with trembling hands, praying they weren't making a mistake. The biopsy revealed more than anyone expected. Under a microscope, the tissue sample showed a hybrid structure, part plant-like, with fibrous roots, and part animal-like, with contractile fibers that mimicked muscle. It was alive, undeniably, and it reacted to stimuli in the lab, curling away from heat and light. The lab in Seattle that analyzed it called it a chimera of unknown origin. Eleanor couldn't process the term.
Chimera?
Like a monster? She asked Dr.
Harper.
He shook his head.
Not a monster.
A biological anomaly. Something that shouldn't exist, but does.
The Discovery sent Schockwaffes trug the medical team.
They reached out to the CDC and a research institute in California, hoping for answers. Meanwhile, Abigail's condition stabilized, but her belly was now so large she could barely walk without help. She still smiled, still asked for her bunny, but her energy was fading. Eleanor and Nathan took turns sleeping in the hospital room, their lives reduced to a blur of fear and waiting. The entity was no longer just a medical mystery, it was a predator, stealing their daughter's vitality. And no one knew how to stop it. The hospital in Portland had become a labyrinth of hope and dread for the Harpers. Abigail's room was filled with small tokens of Love Getwell cards, a balloon shaped like a star, a knitted blanket from her grandmother. But these comforts couldn't mask the growing tension. The biopsy had confirmed the entity's bizarre nature, but it hadn't brought them closer to a solution.
Dr.
Nathaniel Harper, now leading a team of specialists from across the U.S., was relentless in his pursuit of answers. He spent nights poring over data, consulting with geneticists, parasitologists, and even botanists. This thing, he told his team, is rewriting what we know about biology. Abigail, meanwhile, was a paradox. She was weak, her small body struggling under the weight of her swollen abdomen, yet she remained remarkably calm. "It's okay, Mommy," she'd say when Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "It doesn't hurt much." But it did hurt. Eleanor could see it in the way Abigail winced when she moved, the way her breaths came in shallow gasps. The entity was growing, its roots spreading deeper into her organs. The latest scans showed it had formed a network of tendrils, wrapping around her intestines and pressing against her liver. It was, as one doctor put it, colonizing her. The medical team debated their options. Surgery was the most obvious choice, but the risks were staggering. The entity's integration with Abigail's blood vessels meant that removing it could cause catastrophic bleeding. "It's like trying to untangle a spider web without breaking the threads," Dr. Harper explained. "One wrong move, and we could lose her." The alternative, suppressing the entity's growth with drugs or radiation, was equally fraught. Abigail's young body might not withstand the side effects, and there was no guarantee the treatments would work on something so alien. Eleanor and Nathan were drowning in indecision. Every conversation with the doctors felt like a gamble with their daughter's life.
What if we wait too long?
Nathan asked one night, his voice raw. What if this thing takes over completely? Eleanor had no answer. She spent her days holding Abigail's hand, reading her stories, and pretending everything would be okay. But at night, alone in the hospital cafeteria, she let herself cry. The weight of not knowing, of not being able to protect her child, was crushing. A breakthrough came unexpectedly. A research lab in San Francisco, analyzing the biopsy sample, discovered that the entity responded to certain chemical compounds. "It's sensitive to peptides that disrupt cell division," the lead researcher explained over a video call. "We've developed an experimental inhibitor that might slow its growth." The catch? The drug was untested in humans, and its effects on Abigail's healthy cells were unknown.
Dr.
Harper presented the option to the Harpers, his face a mask of cautious hope. "It's a long shot, but it could buy us time to figure out a surgical plan." The Harpers agreed, desperate for any lifeline. The inhibitor was administered through and for, and for the first time in weeks, there was a glimmer of progress. Abigail's belly stopped growing as rapidly, and the entity's movements, tracked by ultrasound, slowed. She even had moments of her old energy, giggling when Nathan made silly faces. But the relief was short-lived. The entity began to adapt, its growth resuming after a few days. "It's like it's learning, Dr." Harper said, frustration creeping into his voice. "It's resisting the inhibitor." The hospital staff doubled down, combining the inhibitor with low-dose radiation targeted at the entity. The treatments were grueling for Abigail, who grew pale and listless. Eleanor stayed by her side, whispering encouragements, while Nathan paced the halls, his anger at their helplessness boiling over. "Why can't they figure this out?" He snapped at a nurse one day, immediately regretting it. The nurse, used to distraught parents, just nodded. "We're trying, Mr.
Harper.
We've never seen anything like this." The community in Willow Creek rallied around the family, but the support came with a cost. News of Abigail's condition had leaked, and social media was buzzing with speculation.
Is it a Government-Experiment? Von X Postread.
Alien parasite in Oregon girl's stomach. Another claimed. The Harpers ignored the noise, but it stung. They just wanted their daughter back, not a viral story. Eleanor stopped checking her phone, unable to handle the mix of sympathy and morbid curiosity. As Abigail's condition worsened, the doctors prepared for a high-risk surgery. "We can't wait any longer, Dr." Harper said. The entity's pressing on her diaphragm now. Her breathing's compromised. The Harpers signed the consent forms, their hands shaking. The night before the surgery, Abigail looked at her parents with her big, trusting eyes. "Will I get to go home soon?" she asked. Eleanor forced a smile, her heart breaking. "Soon, baby. We're going to fix this." Nathan kissed her forehead, unable to speak. The surgery was scheduled for dawn. The Harpers sat in the waiting room, clutching each other's hands, as the clock ticked toward an uncertain future. They didn't know if Abigail would come out of this or what they'd find inside her. All they could do was wait, pray, and hope for a miracle. The operating room at OHSU was a hive of controlled chaos. Surgeons, nurses, and technicians moved with precision, their faces masked but their eyes betraying the weight of the task. Abigail lay on the table, her small body dwarfed by the sterile drapes. The anesthesiologist monitored her vitals as Dr. Nathaniel Harper led the team, his hands steady but his mind racing. The 3D imaging system projected a live view of Abigail's abdomen, revealing the entity's sprawling network of tendrils. It was more complex than they'd feared, its roots entwined with her organs like ivy on a tree. Eleanor and Nathan sat in the waiting room, a purgatory of fluorescent lights and muted television chatter. Eleanor clutched Abigail's bunny, its softness a lifeline to her daughter. Nathan stared at the floor, his mind replaying every moment of the past months. Had they missed a sign? Could they have caught this earlier? The guilt was suffocating, but the fear was worse. Every time a doctor passed by, their hearts leapt, expecting news good or bad. Inside the operating room, the team made their first incision. The entity reacted immediately, its tendrils twitching as if sensing the intrusion. "It's responding, Dr." Harper said, his voice calm but urgent. "Stay focused. We need to isolate the main mass." The ultrasound guided their movements, but the entity was unlike anything they'd seen. It wasn't just tissue, it moved with purpose, contracting and releasing like a living creature. When they clipped a tendril, a strange, viscous fluid oozed out, triggering an unexpected inflammatory response. "Suction now," a surgeon called. Abigail's blood pressure dipped, and alarms blared. The team worked frantically, stabilizing her while trying to remove as much of the entity as possible. But it was fused to her organs, its roots embedded in her intestines and liver.
"We can take it all, Doctor,"
Harper said, sweat beading on his forehead. "If we keep going, we'll lose her." They removed what they could, a small, fibrous mass that pulsed faintly in the surgical tray and closed her up, prioritizing her survival over complete extraction.
The procedure lasted 6 grueling hours.
When Dr. Harper emerged, his face was ashen. "She's stable," he told the Harpers, who leapt to their feet. "We removed part of it, but not all. It's too integrated with her organs. We're sending the sample for analysis, but she's in the ICU now." Eleanor's legs gave out, and Nathan caught her. "Is she going to be okay?" he asked, his voice breaking.
"Doctor."
Harper hesitated. "She's alive, and that's what matters right now. But we're not out of the woods." Abigail spent days in the ICU, her small body connected to tubes and monitors. The Harpers barely left her side, sleeping in shifts on the uncomfortable chairs. The removed sample was sent to labs in Boston, Seattle, and Atlanta, each racing to identify its nature. The results were staggering. The tissue contained a mix of plant-like cellulose and animal-like proteins, with a genetic structure that defied classification. "It's not terrestrial," one researcher wrote, half joking, but the words sent a chill through the team. Was it a mutation?
A contaminant? Novon kult sei.
Abigail woke after 3 days, her voice weak but clear. "Mommy, am I fixed?" she asked, her hand reaching for Eleanor's. Tears streamed down Eleanor's face as she nodded, unable to lie but unwilling to scare her.
"You're getting tears, Sweetie."
The truth was, the entity was still inside her, albeit weakened. Its growth had slowed, but it hadn't stopped. The doctors adjusted her medications, hoping to keep it dormant, but the long-term prognosis was uncertain. The hospital tried to keep the case under wraps, but leaks were inevitable. A Nurses Anonymous X post went viral. 4-year-old girl in Oregon has unknown organism in her stomach. Doctors stumped. The story exploded, drawing attention from conspiracy theorists and tabloids. "Is it an alien life form?" one headline screamed. The Harpers were besieged by messages, offering prayers, others demanding interviews. Eleanor turned off her phone, focusing solely on Abigail. Nathan, usually reserved, snapped at a reporter who ambushed them outside the hospital. "Leave us alone," he shouted, his voice echoing in the parking lot.
"Doctor."
Harper's team worked around the clock, collaborating with international researchers. A lab in Germany reported that the entity's cells divided rapidly in certain conditions, suggesting it was adapting to its environment. "It's almost like it's protecting itself," the German scientist said. The idea was terrifying, a sentient organism, growing inside a child. The team explored new inhibitors, but each attempt was a gamble. Abigail's body was too fragile for aggressive treatments, and the entity's resilience was uncanny. In Willow Creek, the community's support began to waver under the weight of rumors. Some neighbors avoided the Harpers, fearing Abigail was contagious. Others left meals on their doorstep, a silent apology for the whispers. Eleanor and Nathan felt like outcasts in their own town, their lives consumed by hospital visits and unanswered questions. Abigail, though, remained their anchor. Her small smiles, her love for her bunny, her quiet strength, they kept the Harpers going, even as hope felt like a fragile thread.
Von Night, es Elena satt bei Abigails Bett, the girl stirrt.
"It's still there, Mommy," she whispered, her hand on her belly. "It's quieter now, but it's there."
Eleanor's heart shattered.
She kissed Abigail's forehead, promising to fight for her, even as the weight of the unknown pressed down. The entity was still alive, still growing, and no one knew how to stop it. Weeks passed in a blur of hospital routines, each day blending into the next. Abigail was moved to a regular ward, a small victory, but her condition remained precarious. Her belly, though no longer growing at an alarming rate, was still distended, a constant reminder of the entity within. She could walk short distances with help, but her breaths were shallow, and she tired quickly. Eleanor and Nathan took turns staying with her, their lives a fragile balance of hope and exhaustion. The hospital had become their world, its fluorescent lights and antiseptic smells a stark contrast to the life they'd once known in Willow Creek.
Doktor.
Nathaniel Harper's team was relentless, but the entity defied every attempt at classification. The latest lab results confirmed its chimeric nature, part plant, part animal, with a genetic code that matched nothing in known databases. A researcher from the CDC suggested it might be a novel organism, possibly introduced through environmental exposure. Did Abigail ever play in a contaminated area? The researcher asked. Eleanor and Nathan racked their brains. The creek behind their house? The community garden?
Noting stood out.
They felt helpless, unable to pinpoint the moment their daughter's life had changed. The hospital staff tried new treatments, combining inhibitors with targeted therapies to slow the entity's growth. Abigail tolerated the drugs better than expected, but side effects, nausea, fatigue left her frail. "I want to go to the park," she'd say, her voice wistful. Eleanor would smile, promising a trip to the playground when she was better, but the words felt hollow. The entity's tendrils were still embedded in her organs, and resurgery was too risky.
Doktor.
Harper warned that another attempt could cause irreversible damage. "We're buying time," he said, "but we need a breakthrough." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, a microbiologist in Colorado who'd studied extremophilous organisms that thrive in harsh conditions. She analyzed the entity's sample and found it shared traits with deep-sea microbes, capable of surviving in nutrient-scarce environments. "It's not just feeding off Abigail," she explained. "It's recycling her nutrients, almost like a symbiotic relationship." The word symbiotic made Eleanor's skin crawl. This thing wasn't a partner, it was a parasite, stealing her daughter's life. The microbiologist proposed a new approach, a peptide-based drug designed to disrupt the entity's nutrient absorption without harming Abigail's cells. The drug was experimental, requiring FDA emergency approval, but it was their best hope. The Harpers agreed, clinging to the possibility of a reprieve. The first dose was administered under strict supervision, with monitors tracking Abigail's vitals. For a few hours, it seemed to work. The entity's movements slowed, and Abigail's breathing eased. Eleanor and Nathan dared to hope, holding each other as they watched their daughter sleep. But the entity was resilient. By the third day, it adapted, its growth resuming. The doctors increased the dose, but Abigail's body began to reject it, her temperature spiking. "Mommy, it hurts," she whimpered one night, clutching her belly. Eleanor held her, singing softly, as Nathan confronted Dr.
Harper.
"Why isn't it working?" he demanded. "You said this could help."
Doktor. Harpers face was drawn.
"We're learning as we go, Nathan. This thing's not following any rules we understand." The hospital became a battleground, with Abigail at the center. The medical team consulted with experts in Japan, Australia, and Sweden, sharing data in real time. A theory emerged that the entity might have originated from a rare spore, possibly airborne, that found a host in Abigail's body. "It's like it was waiting for the right conditions," a Swedish scientist said. The idea was both fascinating and horrifying, a freak accident of biology that had chosen their daughter. Public interest in Abigail's case grew, despite the hospital's efforts to maintain privacy. A local news outlet ran a story, carefully worded but sensational enough to fuel online speculation. X posts multiplied, with hashtags like Willow Creek Mystery and Abigail Harper trending. Some called for government intervention, others claimed the entity was a bioengineered weapon. The Harpers ignored it all, but the pressure was suffocating. They banned visitors, except for close family, to shield Abigail from the chaos. Abigail, unaware of the storm around her, found small moments of joy. She drew pictures of her bunny, taped them to the hospital walls, and asked for ice cream. But her pain was growing, and the entity's movements were becoming more aggressive. One night, as Eleanor slept in the chair beside her, Abigail woke with a gasp. "It's moving again," she said, her voice trembling. "It's mad." Eleanor's heart raced as she called the nurse. The ultrasound confirmed the worst. The entity was shifting, pressing against Abigail's diaphragm, threatening her ability to breathe. The doctors convened an emergency meeting. "We have to act, Dr. Harper said. "The peptide isn't enough, and waiting will only make it worse." The only option was a second surgery, riskier than the first. The Harpers were torn. Surgery could kill her, but doing nothing was no longer an option. They spent the night praying, holding Abigail as she slept, her small chest rising and falling unevenly. The decision was made: surgery would happen in 48 hours. The Harpers braced themselves for the fight of their lives. The morning of the second surgery dawned gray and heavy, mirroring the mood in the hospital. Abigail was prepped in her room, her small frame almost lost in the tangle of tubes and wires. She clung to her bunny, her eyes wide with fear but trusting. "Will you be there when I wake up?" she asked Eleanor, her voice barely a whisper. "Always, baby," Eleanor said, kissing her forehead. Nathan stood beside them, his jaw tight, fighting back tears. As Abigail was wheeled into the operating room, the Harpers stood frozen, watching their world disappear behind double doors. The surgery was a gamble of unprecedented scale. Dr. Nathaniel Harper and his team had spent days planning, using simulations to map the entity's tendrils. They'd consulted with a neurosurgeon from Johns Hopkins, who warned that the entity's movements suggested a rudimentary nervous system. "It's reacting to stimuli," she said. "You'll need to be precise, or it could trigger a catastrophic response." The team armed themselves with real-time imaging, microtools, and a new peptide inhibitor to slow the entity's reactions during the procedure.
In the waiting room, Elena and Nathan sat in silence, the minutes stretching into eternity.
The hospital chaplain stopped by, offering prayers, but they could barely respond. Every beep of a passing monitor, every hurried step in the hall, sent their hearts racing. They didn't speak of the worst-case scenario, but it hung between them like a specter. Outside, Willow Creek was waking up, oblivious to the battle being fought in Portland. The X-posts continued, with users speculating wildly, but the Harpers were beyond caring. All that mattered was Abigail. Inside the operating room, the team faced a nightmare. The entity had grown since the last surgery, its tendrils thicker and more aggressive. As they began cutting, it reacted violently, contracting and releasing a fluid that caused Abigail's blood pressure to plummet.
"Clamp it now, Doctor,"
Harper shouted, his hands steady despite the chaos. The team worked in sync, isolating sections of the entity while monitoring Abigail's vitals. But the deeper they went, the more entangled it became. "It's fused to her spleen," a surgeon reported. "If we remove it, we risk massive bleeding." Hours passed, each one a test of endurance. The team managed to extract a significant portion of the entity, but complete removal was impossible without sacrificing Abigail's organs. They sealed the remaining tendrils with a biocompatible gel, hoping to isolate them, and closed her up. Abigail's heart rate stabilized, but she was far from safe. "We've done what we can, Dr. Harper told his team, his voice heavy. "Now it's up to her." When he emerged to update the Harpers, his exhaustion was palpable. "She's in recovery," he said. "We removed about 60% of it, but the rest is too integrated. We've slowed its growth, but it's still there."
Eleanor's sub broke the silence.
"Will she live?" she asked.
"Doctor."
Harper nodded.
"She's fighting."
"But we'll need to monitor her closely. The entity could regrow. Nathan's voice was hoarse. What is it? Do we even know yet?
Doktor.
Harper shook his head. We're still analyzing the samples. It's unlike anything we've seen. Abigail woke in the ICU, her voice weak but her spirit intact. Did you fix me, Mommy? She asked, her hand reaching for Eleanor's. We're getting there, Eleanor said, her voice trembling with love and fear. The days that followed were a delicate balance. Abigail's pain lessened, and her breathing improved, but the entity's presence lingered. The hospital became a hub of research, with scientists from around the world studying the extracted samples. One lab in Switzerland reported that the entity's cells showed signs of directed growth, as if it were adapting to its host. The implications were chilling. It wasn't just surviving, it was evolving. The Harpers faced an uncertain future. Abigail was discharged after weeks in the hospital, her belly still swollen but stable. They returned to Willow Creek, where neighbors greeted them with cautious kindness. The rumors had quieted, replaced by sympathy, but the Harpers felt like strangers in their own town. They set up a routine, with regular checkups in Portland and a regimen of inhibitors to keep the entity in check. Abigail returned to small joys, coloring, watching cartoons, but her energy was limited, and her parents watched her every move, terrified of a relapse. One evening, as Eleanor tucked Abigail into bed, the girl looked up with her wide, trusting eyes. It's still there, Mommy, she said, her hand on her belly. But it's sleeping. Eleanor's heart ached, but she smiled. Then let's keep it sleeping, okay? She kissed Abigail's forehead, vowing to fight for her daughter's life, no matter what it took. The medical team continued their research, chasing a cure that remained elusive. The entity was a mystery, a shadow in Abigail's body, and its origins were still unknown. Was it a freak of nature? A cosmic anomaly? The Harpers didn't care, they just wanted their daughter whole. As the seasons changed in Willow Creek, the Harpers held onto hope. They clung to Abigail's laughter, her love for her bunny, and the belief that science or faith or sheer will would save her. The entity was still there, a silent threat, but so was their love, fierce, unyielding, and unbreakable.